The topic of tonight's meditation, I left the title kind of vague enough for me to go in whatever direction I feel like going in tonight, and that's always important for me because I go off in some weird directions. But it is habits, mindfulness, and silence, or mindfulness, habits, and silence, whatever order you want to do that in. The question. This is something that I've asked myself and asked my sifu and thought about for years, and I think it's a really interesting thing to consider, and we'll go into it deeply in a couple of different ways. But the question that I got a couple of days ago from one of our students was, we make habits, and some of the habits are good habits, some of the habits are bad habits, but we have these habits. And the ones that we are choosing to make, we might call these good habits, but then how do you kind of rectify the idea of mindfulness, where you're meant to be totally present in the moment, aware of what you're doing and thinking and all that? How do you rectify that with the idea of a habit, which is kind of by definition like a mindless thing? It's something that you're doing on autopilot. It's something that you can do without having to think about it. And silence doesn't really have much to do with this question, but I want to put it in there anyways because it's our question of the week, or it's our challenge of the week for your mind, is to be in 10 minutes or more of silence every day. And I'll relate that all together by the end of the talk, I hope. The question is great because it absolutely is true that we want to create habits, and if we even don't want to create it and we're not interested in creating habits, they still exist, they are there. And it has been said, there's a study that I heard about, and I can't remember where it was, so you can check my sources and tell me if I was wrong. But the stat that I heard a few years ago was that approximately 80% of everything that we do throughout our day is habit. That's 80% of like the time that we're spending is in this habitual, just kind of going through the motions. And I Googled it earlier today just to see if I was going to get anything fresher, and I didn't get anything helpful. It said between 40% and 95%. So we'll just stick with 80%. It's like right in the middle. Of everything that we do, even if we go on the low end, let's say that it's really the low end of that. It's only like 40 or 50%. That's half of everything you do. You're not really thinking about it. And some people might say, well, that's a great thing, right? I don't want to have to think. I don't like having to be aware of what I'm doing. It's just easier that way. And that's true. And that's why we do it. It's why we have this, really all living creatures, we have this prerogative to be efficient. We have this way of building habits. I can't speak for other animals. I assume that it's true, but for human beings, for sure. And it's just less that we have to think about. Our mind uses energy, it uses time, it uses calories, and we want to be as efficient as we can. So it's like if literally every time I took a step, I had to think about it, right foot, left foot. And I know that some people do have to do that. And it is obviously a lot rougher to get around, but we have the blessing, the ability to be able to do these things with our body that we don't have to think about. And so then we can have our minds focused on other things, which is really nice in one way. But we don't really do it in the nice way. When we're walking down the street, we're not like contemplating the mysteries of the universe and becoming enlightened. We're doing the opposite. We're like on our phones texting people, or, listening to the same song that we've already listened to 3 times that day. And we want to use our time to connect with the present moment as much as we can, because this is where happiness is. This is where we get to experience our highest self. If we are constantly just going through the motions and not really paying attention to what we're doing, this is a very unfulfilling way of living. So the answer that I gave the other day when I got this is the first part of where I'm going to go with this answer tonight, which is fairly simple. You're not going to get rid of all your habits, and you shouldn't try to get rid of all your habits. You shouldn't try to even insert yourself into every moment when you're doing something that is habitual, even if you decide this is a good thing. I'm glad that I'm brushing my teeth. I don't want to get rid of that habit, but I do want to be mindful about it. You might choose to do that sometimes, but you don't need to do it all the time. And you're not a bad person or a bad martial artist if you are, going through the motions sometimes. But it is absolutely important for us to choose the habits that we have. And we should choose to let go of unhelpful habits, and we should choose to create helpful habits, and we should do this in a very mindful way. So one of the simple ways that I like to think about rectifying the idea of habit and mindfulness is simply create mindful habits, or be very mindful when you are creating your habits. And this is the opposite of what most of us do for the vast majority of our habits, if not all of our habits. You just do what you ended up doing by accident, right? Whatever your childhood kind of created for you, that's what you do today. You learn how to brush your teeth however many years ago, and you've been brushing them the same way until now. And you get cavities and your teeth fall out, and you're like, well, I'm brushing my teeth. I don't get what the problem is. Maybe there's a better way to do it. So then maybe you decide, all right, I'm going to change the way that I brush my teeth. And if you were in class the other day when I answered this question before, I used this example for myself because several years ago, I changed how I brush my teeth. It happened the first time for me when I started practicing martial arts, because I got really into this idea of doing everything on both sides as we do in class, right? We don't just go southpaw or orthodox. We do both stances. We do all the techniques on every side, every single side. And this is great because on one level, for one of the reasons we do it is to really create this mindfulness for ourselves. If you're really good at doing something on one side, it takes some effort to be able to do it as well on the other side, or at least to try to do it as well. So I thought, this is great. I'm going to do this with everything in my life, starting with brushing my teeth. And so I always brush my teeth with my right hand. I'm right-handed. I decided now I'm going to do it with my left hand. And let's be clear, I don't think that I do a better job of brushing my teeth with my left hand, but it was very interesting to try this. And in the beginning, it was a total mess. Like I could hardly keep the toothbrush in my mouth. But through a long process of really mindfully brushing my teeth, I learned how to do it just as well with my left as I do on my right. And this is useful if you have an injury, but you don't need to have an injury to just enjoy trying something on the other side. It's a great mindfulness exercise. More recently than that, I got a fancy electric toothbrush. I got the Philips Sonicare, and it like blasts all the plaque off of my teeth. I can feel it. It's like having a power tool in there. And it is a totally different way of brushing your teeth, because instead of all that motion, you're supposed to go in circles and all that. You just like slowly get it to go one tooth at a time across. And that took a whole other process to learn how to do that correctly. And my teeth have never been cleaner. And it's been a really enjoyable process. Another thing that I tried early on in my martial arts practice was brushing my teeth in the horse stance the whole time. And this makes it really interesting. And also things get like really dramatic and kind of dire when you're in a horse stance when you're doing it. If you want to stop yourself from watching too much TV, do it in a horse stance. I promise you, your TV habits will just clean right up. You'll only watch what you really, really love. So the mindful process of creating habits and letting go of bad habits is very important in our practice. I'm going to talk about it more just generally. So there are a couple of great books out there and many more that I haven't read, but the two that I've read are Power of Habit and Atomic Habits. And I'll refer to what James Clear says in Atomic Habits. So there are 4 points or parts of a cycle of a habit. And so I'll go through them and I'll explain them, but they are the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward. And I'll use the idea of smoking, which I don't do, but I think some people can relate to at least. So the cue for smoking is like, I'm at work and my smoking buddy starts walking outside, and I know that's it, it's time to smoke. And there might be many rewards that you're thinking of at the end of this, and the cue is starting to get you. The cue says, okay, it's time, because it triggers the craving. The thing that you are craving is maybe it's just the social interaction. Maybe it is the actual, calming effect of smoking. Whatever it is that you get the craving of, it might be something that you're not even aware of. It's the effect of the nicotine, whatever. But the cue triggers the craving. The craving is, again, the reward, but you haven't even gotten to the reward yet because you got to go do the thing. That's the response. So the response is, I get up and I walk outside and I smoke. And then I get the reward. And the reward is whatever the thing is that keeps me coming back to doing this thing over and over again. And that is the cycle, because the reward reinforces it so that the next time the cue happens, you get that craving even stronger, and then you do the response and you get the reward. And so it keeps going and going and going and going. So if we look at this idea of creating a habit that we want, so we'll use brushing our teeth as the habit that we want to create. Let's use a martial arts example. You shouldn't be brushing your teeth in the dojo. But let's say that you want to create the habit of making a great fist when you throw a front punch. So the cue is, I say, we're doing a front punch. Or maybe you're sparring and the cue is your partner goes like this, and there's the cue. The craving is, I got to make this perfect fist because it's going to feel great when I make impact with it. Maybe the reward is Sifu's going to look at my fist and say, wow, that's such a great fist. You've really been working hard in class and you're an amazing student. Whatever the craving is, that's what you're going to respond to. The response is that you make the fist. You take your time to actually roll your fingers and put your thumb where it belongs and keep your wrist straight and make a tight fist. Or maybe you're not there yet and you're just trying to do those things, right? And the reward you get is that super satisfying thunk on the mitt, or you land the punch and you didn't hurt yourself. The reward is there, and that reinforces the next time it's time to throw the punch. Even though you started off punching like this, you got that negatively reinforced when you hurt yourself. Now you get the positive reinforcement. So the cue happens. I get the craving for that great fist. The response I make is to make the tight fist, and the reward I get is when it actually lands and it's great. And this seemingly very simple, super short kind of experience is what happens. Reinforcement over many reps over years eventually leads to a great fist. And the way that you can use this understanding of habits with those different stages along the way is the cue. You want to make this something that is very obvious for you. If it's something that you want, it's got to be obvious. Every time possible that you can create the cue to make that fist, it's there. The next step for the craving is you've got to make it very enticing, right? So if it is not interesting to you to make a tight fist, it's probably because you've never actually hit anything correctly with a tight fist, or you've never hit anything incorrectly with a tight fist. So you got to make it enticing for you, whatever it is. Make it a game in your head. I got to make this really exciting for me to make the fist. The response, you got to make it something that you can do and be consistent with it, and really, get the details and know what you're doing correctly if it's a martial arts technique. And then the reward has got to be something that you really allow yourself to enjoy, really be present for and enjoy that reward that you get from it. If you're trying to break a habit, you do the opposite of all that stuff. So if we go back to the idea of smoking, the cue is like, I'm going to stop hanging out with these people who smoke. that is, to my understanding, the number one best way to stop smoking is to stop spending time with people who smoke. If you're not in that social situation, it just won't come up for you as much. And if that's not an option, then you got to find some other way. The next part is the craving. So you got to make smoking something that you just don't crave, or replace it with something that you crave even more. Like, I crave my health, or I'm going to replace it with a stick of gum. It's something that I can really still see the reward for and enjoy it, but I'm not kind of allowing myself to crave the same thing in the same way. The response, the smoking, you got to get rid of that, or again, change it with something. So if you do change your response from I smoke the cigarette to I chew a piece of gum, then that is very simple. You've just taken that thing out of the equation and replaced it with something else, but you've got to allow yourself to have the reward, or it does not get reinforced. So if you think, I'm going to chew gum instead of smoking today, and it doesn't feel good and there's no reward, you don't really feel the same kind of great reward for it, you're not going to do it again. You have not created a new habit. You just chewed one stick of gum, and then the next time somebody goes to smoke, you're going to go smoke with them. So really allow yourself to enjoy the reward that you're getting from that. If it's something that you're trying to create, don't allow yourself to enjoy the reward for smoking. So it's, remind yourself how terrible it is for you, or just like cough the whole time that you're smoking. I don't know. So this understanding is great, super important, and you can read much more about it if you do read Atomic Habits or other books. They'll give you a much more fleshed out framework for all this. But when we're talking about mindfully creating habits, or mindfully letting go of our habits that we don't want, keep this framework in mind. And it could be something as simple as, I want to drink more water, so I'm going to make it super easy for myself. I'm going to put the water right there. And this is something that I've done in my own life, and I still do it. There's a glass of water in the bathroom right next to the sink. Every time I go in there to do whatever, I'm brushing my teeth, I'm washing my face, anything else that happens in the bathroom, I drink the water every time, because it's so easy. Like, I would have to be totally out of it to miss this opportunity. The glass is there and it's filled with water already. I don't even have to walk into the next room to do it, because I already filled the glass with water. So this is a built-in cue, because the glass is right there. The craving is like, yeah, I'm thirsty right now, I'm going to do it. The response is, I just drink the water, and the reward is, yeah, it was very satisfying. I allow myself to feel really healthy and enjoy the fact that I just did that. And it just replays over and over and over again. This is something that I did not do very well for a long time. It took me years to come up with this magical solution for drinking more water. It's putting water in front of myself so that I do it all the time. And you can find that something like that will work for you as well. Now, I'm going to try to slide a little bit more into a meditation kind of side of this whole topic. So if we have created mindful habits, we want to keep them. We don't want to say, like, I don't want any habits at all. But there is a point of view here that says, basically, anytime I'm just going through the motions, it's not what I want. Again, like I said, I don't think you should think of yourself as a bad person if you've created good habits and you're doing them. But if you think to yourself, I want to be as mindful as I can be throughout the day, and I'm going to use my habits as part of this opportunity to be mindful, great. I wholly encourage you to do that. So maybe it is creating habits that are mindfulness, like I'm making sure that I'm meditating every day, or I'm making sure that I'm doing breathing exercises, or I am, mindfully walking down the street. It might be a small shift where you normally just walk down the street with you on your phone texting, but now you walk down the street and you're just enjoying, every step. You are, smelling the crisp fall air, or, whatever you want to do to bring yourself into the moment while you're walking down the street. Do it like we practice in Tai Chi, where you're very mindfully setting your heel down first. So you don't have to change what you do, but you can change the way that you do it. And really make sure that that mindful kind of enjoyment of being present is there. You also might just decide that I want to be present and not even change the way that I do something. I'm just injecting this ability to be present in whatever I do. This is trickier. It is easier for sure if you at least slightly change the way that you're doing something, because that causes you to be present, it causes you to be in the moment. But you can just inject mindfulness into it. And it's basically like this. I set out with the intention of being mindful. And whatever I do for the next period of time, I'm being as mindful and present as I can be. Whatever the actions that I'm taking, most of which are guaranteed to be habits, I'm just there. And you might have to remind yourself of this 1,000 times a day if you're actually going to pull off being, consistently mindful. But if you are, for example, setting alarms on your phone, or you're putting sticky notes all around or something like that, you're constantly getting this reminder to be mindful and present. That's a great way to deal with it too. I want to change gears slightly to this idea of meditation and silence and the habit that we're trying to create around this. I heard this a couple of years ago, this way of describing what enlightenment is, and it hit me in a way that I had not been hit in a while, and it stuck, and I love this way of phrasing it. So you've heard me talk about the ego mind. You're identifying as the ego. You're identifying as your smaller self, your separate self, this part of you that doesn't feel like at one with the universe. This is your small self that is all caught up in its own kind of small pettiness. And this doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It means that you are a person. All human beings do this. This is our kind of normal way of being. So this phrase that I heard was referring to as enlightenment as breaking the habit of ego identification. And I do believe this is possible, or I wouldn't be talking about it right now. But if we treat identifying as the ego as a habit, then we have the opportunity to both be very mindful when we're in that habitual state, just like I was just talking about, but also to decide to break that habit. If we choose, if we want to not be in the ego state, we should be able to break that habit. And it might be something that in the moment we're able to let go of, but the more we practice it, the more we use this cycle of creating habits or letting go of habits, we're able to reinforce the way that we want to be. I can't think of a much better way of doing that than meditation, so that's what I'm going to use tonight for our example. But there are many, many opportunities for this. And if we use meditation as the example, ego identification is essentially a thought that sounds something like me, mine, me versus you, me separate from you. It is when you see somebody look at you funny, you think, what's wrong with you? Why are you looking at me that way? When somebody takes the last donut or whatever you love to eat the most, you think, like, how dare these people eat my last donut? Whatever that habitual thought is, you want to be able to recognize it immediately. And of course, it's going through the same kind of cycle. It's happening lightning fast. The cue is you see that the last donut is gone, and immediately you get the craving to slip in. Maybe it's a craving for donuts, but you slip into this ego state of like, oh, how could you do that? And the response is either the thought or the action that you take that is very ego driven, and then the reward that you get is that immediate feeling of justification, of like righteous indignation, like whatever it is. And it happens like that. And that's why it's so hard to recognize. It's why it's so hard to break through. And we do it like a million times every single day. So we've really been building this habit of ego identification for our whole lives for a very long time, super successfully. We're so great at it. So it's going to take some real effort to break that habit of ego identification. When we sit to meditate, we're sitting in silence. And in silence, if it is silent around us and we're allowing our minds to become silent, now we are experiencing something that is outside of that cycle of ego identification, right? In silence, there is no me versus you separation, none of that stuff. If you actually have no thoughts in your mind, what you are experiencing is essentially what is beyond ego. You have let go, at least for the moment, of that ego identification. And when we then let our mind wander to something, and then we try to let that go and come back to the breath, come back to the silence, that's reinforcing the good habit, the habit that we want of having our mind be free of the ego identification. It's reinforcing the habit of having an expansive consciousness, of feeling like you're connected to everything. And while on one level, this idea of mindfulness sounds super out there, woo-woo, it's like, okay, sure, and then next you're going to tell me I got to smoke pot and wear tie-dye and whatever. You can do what you want to do, but I'm telling you, this very simple concept of sitting and breaking yourself out of that cycle and just allowing yourself to be present and fully experience what this moment is and what you are on a very deep level is very real. It is as tangible as anything you will ever experience with your mind if you allow yourself to have this experience. But it is so fleeting. It is like, it's a whisper. It's less than a snap. And as soon as you have it, it goes away right away, right? For a moment, you focus on the breath and you're like, yeah, this is so nice. I'm so good at meditation. And if you've ever heard me talk about my first meditation, that's exactly what happened. I was sitting for a few minutes. I finally focused on the breath. My thoughts disappeared for a split second. And I thought, I am so good at meditation. And of course, my ego was right there. And the rest of the meditation was awful, but I was still kind of, craving that really nice experience that I had for that one moment where it wasn't noise, it wasn't ego, it was just nothingness and everythingness. And the more we allow ourselves to experience that, the more it becomes reinforced, and the more we are able to let go of the habit of ego identification. So when you sit to meditate tonight, just seek the silence. It will be silent here in the dojo. It would be great if you were silent at home too. If you closed the door and turned everything off and everything that you need to do to be silent. Yell at your family. Don't say anything for 15 minutes. Slam the door. But we also want to silence our own minds. And one of the best ways to do this is to continue going back to the breath. And when a thought of judgment pops in, you're judging the breath, you're judging your meditation, you're judging anything that's going on at all, or whatever random thought pops in, then you just let it go as quickly and easily as you can without adding anything to this, right? Your mind wants to make a huge deal of it. As soon as your mind wanders and you have a thought, your ego wants to jump on that and be like, see, you're terrible at meditation, you can't do this, or whatever your brain does with that. And just allow yourself to let it go before it even gets into that next cycle. So that's its own habitual thought. That is its own, your ego's own way of breaking into the party and messing with your meditation. So it is as simple as can be. There is hardly anything that you can imagine simpler to do in your life than just sitting still in silence and breathing. And you're just focusing on your breath. But it is also the hardest thing that you will ever do. The highest level of human activity is to completely be present, focusing on the breath and not letting your mind wander. When it does, coming right back to the breath. And if we treat this like a habit that we are creating and reinforcing every time we do it, and we allow ourselves, sometimes you should actually do this in the meditation. When you come back to the breath, make it feel really nice. You can come back to the breath. I don't want you to do this in the dojo because it's distracting for other people, but maybe you're at home. When you come back to the breath, just do it with a really satisfying sigh. And feel how nice that is to come back to the breath, rather than the opposite of that, which we normally do, beat yourself up when your mind wanders. At the end of your meditation, allow yourself to really feel that reward for the work that you've just done, for the time that you've just spent in that state, in that higher state of consciousness. Allow yourself to feel the reward for, the direction that you are going in life. And the more that you allow yourself to feel the reward, the more that you are reinforcing the habit of just sitting to meditate, the habit of keeping your mind focused and in the present when you are actually meditating. So let's try that now. Sit comfortably.